This little man beat 2 whole empires in a single afternoon. Every king in Europe was scared of him. And in his entire life, he lost a fight exactly 1 time. Not to Russia, not to England. He lost to rabbits. Real, actual rabbits. Hundreds of them. Don't worry, we'll get to that. Hello, mortals. I am Silas the Immortal, and I have been alive for over 2,500 years. Which means, when historians say, according to ancient sources, I say, yes, I was standing right there. Usually in these videos, I just watch. I sit in the back and judge you humans while I drink something expensive. I don't get involved. That's my rule. But today is different. Because today, we're talking about Napoleon Bonaparte. And Napoleon wasn't some stranger I watched from a rooftop. Napoleon was my friend. Now, there will be a second video about Napoleon the politician, the crown, the laws, and the giant ego that tried to take over the whole world. That's a story for another day. Today is about Napoleon the soldier, the general, the most dangerous mind I ever met. And trust me, I know all about staying up late. First, let's kill the dumbest myth about him. It really annoys me. You think Napoleon was tiny, right? A short, angry little man standing on a box to shout at taller people. The Napoleon complex. Wrong. That was a lie made up by the British. English cartoon artists drew him as a screaming baby for 20 years, and people believed it. The truth? He was about 5'6". That was totally normal for a Frenchman back then. He was taller than me on a bad day. His soldiers called him the Little Corporal. A corporal is a low-rank soldier, so it sounds like an insult. It wasn't. They called him that because he acted like one of them. He would stand right next to the regular gunners and help aim the cannons himself. That nickname didn't mean they thought he was small. It meant they loved him. Because deep down, that's what he really was. A gunner. He started as an artillery officer. That's the guy in charge of the big cannons. He was basically a math genius who got pointed at an empire. While everyone else was busy being brave and dumb, he was quietly working out exactly where the cannonballs would land. I first met him in Italy in the 1790s. He was 26 years old. They handed him a French army that was starving, hadn't been paid, and was wearing rags. His own soldiers thought he was a joke. Some skinny kid from Corsica with a funny accent. 6 weeks later, that skinny kid had marched them over the mountains and beaten 3 enemy armies, one at a time, before they could join up. Nobody saw it coming. And I've seen everything. I remember him staying up all night, the only other person awake in a sleeping camp, staring at his maps and mumbling numbers to himself. Perfect company for a vampire. Everyone else was asleep. He and I had time to talk. So how did he actually do it? This is the part the movies always skip. Napoleon didn't win by being brave. Every idiot on a battlefield is brave. He won because of something that sounds boring but wins wars. Getting his army fed and getting it to the right place fast. Here's his big trick. Every other general moved his army as one giant blob. Slow, hungry, easy to spot. Napoleon did something smarter. He split his army into smaller groups. Each group was like a mini army all on its own. It had its own foot soldiers, its own horsemen, and its own cannons. So each group could travel on its own road, find its own food, and, most importantly, survive alone against the whole enemy army long enough for the other groups to come running and help. So his army traveled spread out, covering crazy distances and eating food off the land as it went. Then, at the perfect moment, all the little groups would snap together into one big fist right where the battle was. Spread out to walk, come together to fight. It sounds easy. It's actually really, really hard. And nobody did it as well as him. The result of all this? Speed. His men could walk 20 or 30 miles a day and show up in places no normal general thought was possible. His enemies kept getting ready for the army they expected, and kept getting punched by the army that was already there. Let me show you what that speed looked like. The year is 1805. An Austrian general named Mack sat his whole army down in a town called Ulm and waited for the French. He felt very safe. He should not have felt safe. Instead of marching straight at Mack, Napoleon sent his groups on a huge circle, going around the Austrians and coming up behind them. By the time Mack looked up from his lunch, the French weren't in front of him. They were all around him, standing between him and home. No big battle, no epic fight. He just outwalked a whole army into a trap. About 23,000 Austrians put down their weapons at Ulm without a real fight. Napoleon supposedly said, "I have beaten the enemy just by marching." Imagine losing a war because the other guy was better at walking. Mack went home in shame. I'd feel bad for him, but he chose to sit still and wait for a man whose whole personality was move faster than should be possible. That one's on you, Mack. And then, a few weeks later, came the greatest day of his whole life. Austerlitz. If you remember only one battle from this channel, make it this one. Because I was on that hill, wrapped in 3 cloaks against the cold, and I have never seen a human brain work like that, before or since. 2 emperors came to destroy him, the ruler of Russia and the ruler of Austria, with about 85,000 men between them. Napoleon had maybe 68,000. Fewer men, deep in enemy land, and everyone was sure he was trapped. Trapped. That's what they thought. Here's what he actually did. He looked at the battlefield and gave away the best spot on purpose. There was a hill in the middle, the Pratzen Heights, the strongest place to stand on the whole field, and Napoleon made one side of his army look weak and pulled his men off that hill. He basically handed it to the enemy like a gift. He even pretended to be scared. He started fake peace talks. He acted nervous on purpose. It was all an act. And the young, cocky Russian ruler fell for it completely. He marched most of his army off the middle hill and down to crush that weak-looking French side, which was the worst decision anybody made that whole century. Because the whole time, Napoleon was holding that weak side together with a group led by a general named Davout. And those men had walked about 70 miles in 2 days to get there in time. 70 miles, on foot, just to show up at the exact right second. And the moment the enemy left that middle hill empty to chase the bait, the morning fog cleared and the sun came out. He called it his Son of Austerlitz, and he talked about it for the rest of his life. Napoleon threw his hidden men straight up the middle of that hill, right into the empty gap the enemy had left behind. He drove a spike right through the center of their army and split it into 2 pieces. Now the 2 halves couldn't help each other. He had tricked them into wrecking their own position. It was over by the afternoon. Total wipeout. The combined power of 2 empires smashed by the man they thought they had cornered. And here's the little detail I love. He won it on December 2nd, exactly 1 year to the day after he crowned himself emperor. The man had style. Now, the propaganda. Afterwards, Napoleon's official reports said that thousands of running enemy soldiers drowned when he blasted a frozen lake and cracked the ice. Scary picture. Also mostly fake. The water was shallow, and when they drained it later, there were barely any bodies. But it made a great headline. Napoleon understood something most generals never do. Winning the battle is only half the job. You also have to win the story. Every dictator since has copied that trick. He just did it with nicer clothes. The next year, 1806, it was Prussia's turn. The Prussian army had a huge reputation, supposedly the best and most professional in Europe. Lots of shiny uniforms and fancy marching. Napoleon took it apart in a single day. 2 battles at the same time. At a place called Jena, Napoleon crushed a Prussian force he thought was the main army. Meanwhile, a few miles away, that same General Davout ran into the actual main Prussian army. And even though he had way fewer men, he beat them too. By himself. The famous Prussian army fell apart in weeks. And that shows the other half of his genius, the part that isn't about maps. Napoleon built men like Davout. He created a brand new group of top generals. He called them his Marshals. And he promoted people based on one thing only: talent. Not your family, not your rich title, not which duke your grandfather sucked up to. If you were good, you rose up. A poor soldier from nowhere could end up a prince. Do you get how crazy that was back then? In every other army in Europe, rich nobles just bought their high ranks with money. Napoleon gave the top jobs to whoever was actually good at the job. That's why his soldiers would run straight into cannon fire for him, because they knew that if they were amazing, he would notice. He used to say that what's in a soldier's heart matters about 3 times more than his weapon. He really believed that, and it worked. Even his greatest enemy, the Duke of Wellington, the man who finally beat him, admitted that just having Napoleon show up on a battlefield was worth 40,000 extra soldiers. 40,000. That's not a general. That's a natural disaster in a fancy hat. Another famous writer just called him the God of War and left it at that. I saw it with my own eyes. He'd ride down the line before a battle, and 30,000 freezing, exhausted men who should have run away would suddenly decide they'd rather die than let him down. I've been charming for 2,500 years. I have never had that effect on a crowd. And believe me, I've tried. Okay, I promised you the rabbits. Here are the rabbits. Before you decide this man was unbeatable, let me tell you about the one enemy that truly defeated Napoleon Bonaparte. It wasn't Russia. It wasn't England. It was bunnies. The story goes like this. After signing a big peace deal, his staff threw a party with a rabbit hunt. They gathered up hundreds of rabbits to set loose so the emperor could shoot them. One problem. Somebody bought tame farm rabbits instead of wild ones. Tame rabbits who see a human and think, food. So they let the rabbits go, and instead of running away in fear, the rabbits all turned around and charged the most powerful man in the world. Hundreds of them, swarming up his legs, looking for lunch. The conqueror of Europe, the god of war, had to run back to his carriage to escape, and the rabbits chased him. Austerlitz, he won. Ulm, he won. Bunnies? Total embarrassing defeat. I have never let him forget it. Not once. I could keep going for hours. He fought around 60 battles over 20 years and lost only a few of them. For a long time, it really did look like nothing on earth could stop him. Now, this is the part where I was going to tell you about his last battle. Waterloo, 1815. The day it all finally came crashing down. But no, not today. The fall of Napoleon, how the greatest general in history lost everything, is not some little note you tack onto the end of a video. That story is big enough and sad enough to deserve a whole video all on its own. So we'll do that one another day. Today, I just wanted you to meet him the way I remember him. Not the ending, the brilliance. The man at the very top of his game, outmarching every king in Europe. And, obviously, the bunnies. Never forget the bunnies. Because here's the thing, I've outlived a lot of people. Most humans I forget within 100 years. Napoleon? I don't. He was arrogant, impossible, and sometimes cruel. And he was the most interesting person I ever stayed up late talking to. One day, I'll tell you how his story ends. But not tonight. Tonight, in this video, he's still winning. And he'd hate me getting soft on camera. So, homework. So, what did we learn from the deadliest general in history? 1. Speed beats strength. He almost never had the biggest army. He had the fastest one. And he was always where the enemy wasn't ready. 2. Reward talent, not rich families. Promote the good ones, and they'll follow you anywhere. 3. Win the battle and the story. A win nobody talks about is only half a win. And 4. Whatever you do, never buy tame rabbits for a hunt. If you enjoyed this little march through the smoke and the cannon fire, hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it makes sure I don't show up behind you during your next meeting to fix your battle plans. Leave a comment. If I gave you 30,000 soldiers, which army in history would you fight? Choose carefully. And no, you can't pick the rabbits. Next time, we do Napoleon the politician. the crown, the laws, and the giant ego that finally bit off more than even he could chew. Bring wine. You'll need it. Now, if you'll excuse me, the sun is almost up. And unlike my old friend, I have never won a single fight with the sun. Stay immortal, everyone, or at least walk faster than your problems.